Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another round of sound. This is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Bob Pompeani. Thanks for joining us. Hope you had a nice weekend. We have a lot to get into, as we always do. Now, 16 weeks without sports, 113 days. I'm not really counting, but that's what it is. NHL training camps. They're going to begin here within a week or so. We're going to talk about that and potentially a new CBA. We'll also get into the Pirates. We have an opening day game now known about them, and also guys opting out. But the #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown will be the NFL. And the reason it is because last week the NFL didn't directly say this, but they certainly are looking at 2 preseason games. That's what they want. It's streamed out through various media types. But now it looks like the NFLPA doesn't want any. Here to discuss your panel tonight, as usual, we have Rich Walsh, my colleague here at KDKA over in Studio B, and Andrew Fillipponi, the nationally acclaimed Andrew Fillipponi on the Pony Express Show, CBS Sports Radio, of course, PM team every day, 2 to 6, which means he never gets a day off. All right, so guys, let's talk into it. Rich, start with you. NFL wants 2 games. I think that's a pretty good compromise. I think there's some things you have to go through. The NFLPA, a unanimous vote, according to reports, they don't want to play any preseason games. Where will this end?
I think it'll end with playing 2 preseason games, because I think there might be ramifications here. What if the NFL has to pay back these networks money, or there's got to be some kind of money issue here? I would imagine it's somewhere along the line. And if the NFLPA doesn't want these games, then the NFLPA or the players are going to have to give up money at some point along the line. So I think we're going to see 2 NFL preseason games, and that's what I think it should be. I mean, I know I love doing the NFL preseason games here, the Steelers preseason games with you, and I would like to do 16 of them. But I have always been a proponent of 2 preseason games and 2 extra NFL regular season games.
Not me. Go ahead, Pony.
Oh, Bob, I don't want to butt in here. If you've got an opinion, let's hear it, baby. No. I'm in the mood now.
No, I didn't know.
You can't tease me like
Rich
that.
said that.
Why don't you want more NFL regular season games? Why would you? Why would you? But why do you want 4 preseason games?
Because coaches like it, because they get to evaluate it. The people who are going to lose out in this situation are the guys who are potentially NFL players who will never get a chance of being looked at. Draft picks, other than the #1 and #2, potentially never get an opportunity.
But Bob, they have their minds made up before they go into that last game. Very rarely does that last game even matter.
I disagree, but I also have seen evidence that it can matter, and my point is I'd rather have 4. That's just the way I feel. Andrew, go ahead on the topic.
Well, what's weird to me is that most of the NFL players are veteran or rookie minimum, veteran minimum guys. In fact, I think the number is 55%. So I'm a little bit surprised, Bob, that the NFLPA would vote against preseason games when most of the guys might feel like they need those preseason games to earn a roster spot. So that's my first take on this. My second point is I think this is great for the Steelers. If I'm a team like the Steelers where there's continuity aplenty with the coaching staff and with the team they're bringing back from last year, I'd rather have 0 preseason games. Because how are the Bengals with Joe Burrow and how are the Browns with an entirely new coaching staff, Bob, going to get themselves ready with 0 preseason games? I think it plays into their hand big time. Their first game is against the Giants. They've got a rookie coach. How are they going to be ready for that game against the Steelers? I think 0 would be wonderful from a Steelers perspective.
From this season, absolutely for them, because they also return a very good team, especially defensively. Rich, I'm going to get into that right now. Fantasy football, according to Pro Football Focus, has the Steelers as the #1 defense in all of football. And to Andrew's point, I think that's true when you look at the cohesion. Just about everyone returns, and you add a healthy Stephon to it. Who would be better than them defensively, do you think, at this point?
Maybe the 49ers, they're pretty good. The Packers, the Patriots. I think the Patriots are going to be really good. I know we'll get to this later in the show. But I wouldn't bet against the Steelers. I think they have one of the best defenses. Most of the guys are coming back. They lose 1 important piece, but they gain 2 it back. I think Minkah Fitzpatrick obviously makes a huge difference with this defense. And that's one of the big reasons they're one of the best. And they got 2 of the best outside linebackers in the NFL. And then on the other side, they've 2 pretty good quarterbacks. I don't really see a weakness right now. I mean, I guess their weakness is Terrell Edmonds, and he's a serviceable safety.
Bob, they should win the division. If I could go on the Facebook, on the FanDuel Sports app right now, I'd put a bet on them to win the division. I think the odds are in their favor. Everyone's picking Baltimore. They lost Marshall Yanda, who's one of the greatest guards of all time. And they're replacing him with a middle-round pick and maybe a journeyman. They're going to fight it out in camp. That's a big loss. And I also don't think that Lamar Jackson is going to rush for 1,000 yards again. So I think based on that defense, they've got, 9 first-round picks in the starting lineup. If defense wins, if people believe that, the defense wins championships, then the Steelers should be the team to beat in the AFC North.
I agree with that. I've been saying that. And I also think Jackson's a remarkable athlete and a good quarterback. He could be a great quarterback.
But you haven't picked him, Bob. I want to hear the words out of your mouth.
No,
the Steelers will win the AFC North.
You haven't heard me say it, but I've picked them at 12-4. That's what I said a few weeks ago.
Okay.
So that's my pick. And
No one's taking the Browns here?
No, the Browns are, to Andrew's point,
Garbage.
you got a whole new coaching staff. You also have new players coming in. We'll find out what they're going to be. They should be better. But I think Lamar Jackson is a guy who will get better, especially in the postseason. I think this team could do worse than 14-2, and they may be, 11-5. They could be 10-6, but they could be even better in the postseason. Last year, Rich, they were 1-0.
I got the Steelers winning the division too, and I had 2 big reasons: their defense and a motivated Ben Roethlisberger.
Okay, now let's talk about Cam Newton.
Not James Conner?
Why do you keep picking on James Conner, Andrew? I mean, give the guy a chance. Yes, you
I'm
do.
not. I'm just I do not.
You fall into this, he's okay. I understand. There are a lot of guys injury prone. Look at David Njoku right now. He finds himself trying to get out of Cleveland. Why? He got injured last year, and they went out and signed Austin Hooper and gave him a lot of money. So
Smart.
that doesn't
was a
mean
good move by the Browns.
it was, but that doesn't mean that he can't be good. All right, now you got me off track. I want to talk about Cam Newton. So Andrew, start with you on this. Cam Newton's going to New England. You talk about motivated. This guy should be. He's going to make only $1.7 million plus incentives. If he's healthy, Andrew, what does it mean to the Patriots?
Well, the Patriots, I think, after the Chiefs become the second favorite to win the AFC, Bob, is what I think it does for them. They've got the best coach defense in the entire NFL. And now I think Bill Belichick, he watched Baltimore last year. I think he's wanted to go to that read option, zone read offense for a long time, but you obviously can't do that with Brady. He knows how, as a defensive coach, how hard it is to game plan for 11 offensive players where the quarterback is a threat pass. And I think they're going to cater the offense to Cam Newton, and they are going to run away with that division. The Bills are not for real.
So you have the Patriots ahead of the Ravens, Pony?
Yes.
Let me ask you guys this, and I'm curious. Do you think, I like the Cam Newton move. I love it. I think the Patriots are going to be good this year. I totally agree with you. Do you think Bill Belichick is going to adapt to a Cam Newton-style quarterback, or does Cam Newton have to adapt to what they do up there?
No, they're going to do what Andrew said. They're going to utilize him, maybe not as much because of his Liz Frank injury and everything else, but the threat gives them something. And don't forget, he could throw the ball down the field.
But he can't be a Tom Brady, right? He's not Tom Brady.
Well, he's not a statuesque.
Well, you don't put him in a West Coast dink and dunk offense. That's not his game.
So you have to change your offense altogether, right?
Well, but hold on. The thing I've always respected about Belichick, guys, is that week to week, depending on the opponent and what he has, he changes his game plan. He doesn't say, this is how we play, the standard is the standard, we're going to roll it out and be the same team week to week. If they need to run it 40 times one week, they do that. If they need to pass it 30 times, they do that, depending on the strengths and weaknesses of each game. So I think he'll build the team around Cam Newton. He won't force him into the Brady system.
All right,
I think they'll get off to a slow start, but I think they're going to be one of the best teams in the AFC at the end of the year.
I think
it'll take some time to adapt.
So thankful that they are in the AFC East. All right, I have 30 seconds real quick. Rich, start with you on this one. Just quick answers. Antonio Brown, another rumor, to the Texans now. Yes or no? Does it happen?
No, I think he has a better shot going to the Seahawks. I think that's a spot where I see him landing. I think he's going to get an opportunity somewhere. How long is it going to last? How long is he going to be on a team? I don't know, but I think some team is going to give him an opportunity.
Houston makes a ton of sense because of the O'Brien-Belichick relationship, and Bill O'Brien's desperate to win. Bob, I mean, he traded away DeAndre Hopkins. He's traded away all his first-round picks. They need to win right now. I think he might do it. Deshaun Watson signed off on it. I could see it.
Yeah, should have just kept DeAndre Hopkins if that's the case. If you're going to win, I don't understand why he was a problem. All right, We have plenty more coming up, including Pirates, Penguins, but I want to remind you it's exciting when a team moves into a new building. That's certainly true with the team at number 1 Cochran Hyundai South Hills and their spacious new facility. Even though they only moved just a mile up the street. Right now, for a limited time, get special grand opening offers in both sales and service. Check it out. It's the new number 1 Cochran Hyundai South Hills, now conveniently located at 3220 West Liberty Avenue. We'll be back with Pirate Talk next. The number 1 Cochran Sports Showdown is brought to you by number 1 Cochran, Go One Better, and by Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. Have a greater hand in your health.